Alright everybody, welcome to the first of hopefully many videos of Eatin Cheap, where we're basically going to try and make meals that you can have on pretty much any budget, feed more than a couple people, for mainly like big families, or even if you just want something cheap for yourself that can last a few days. Today we are going to be making hamburger bun pizzas. I don't know if you can see it very well. It's just basic hamburger buns, great value. Everything I have that I'm going to be making for this specific one was about, I think it was about $15. And it is going to turn every single one of these hamburger buns into its own little pizza. I do go very basic with these. It was something that I grew up with. And this is pretty close to how we used to make it whenever I was a kid. So, first off, obviously the hamburger buns. Basic, great value pizza sauce. The cheapest ground beef that you can find at Walmart, which at this moment was the 7327 lean to fat. And then I thought I'd get a little, I could have gone a little bit cheaper, but in order to cover them all and to get a good mix of cheeses, triple cheddar and regular mozzarella. So, the first thing you're going to want to do, get your pan, get your fire going. We're going to open up the meat. Oops. This is home cooking, so everything has been cleaned. Everything has been sterilized. So no need to worry. But basically, I'm just going to start getting your meat in the pan. Turn the meat about medium low heat. You don't want to burn everything. There's probably an easier way to open this. This is the easiest way I've ever known. And then you just push it out. Of course, there are always ways to do this however you want. If you want to do chicken, if you want to do, just kind of in general, whatever. So we'll get it a little bit chopped up first before we season it. Of course, this is all very cheap ingredients, so if you're wanting something super high quality, obviously you're going to have to pay the price for it. This is just generic family meals, so I don't imagine that your kids are going to be having, Wagyu beef stuff whenever you're trying to make a meal such as this. Probably should have gotten a slightly bigger pan, but oh well, because I've got 2 pounds of meat in here, because as the meat cooks out and the fat starts rendering, it shrinks a bit. So the pan will probably be a decent size later. Grab my spices that I put into the meat. That one, and that one. Put that in there too. So, the spices that I have, and each one of these, if you get the great value version, you can get a nice, this-ish sized jar for about $1. So, we're starting with minced onion, thyme leaves, basil, and some garlic powder. So, I tend to go a little heavy on the garlic. Garlic has never not been my friend. The basil, just a few shakes is good. Maybe a teaspoon or so's worth. Same with the thyme leaves. And the minced onion, I also like to go rather hard, especially whenever it's going to be my main meat. Plus, I like onions on pizza anyway, so. And then, basically, just make sure it stays chopped up and stir it around until there is no more pink left in anything. This may take a few minutes. Usually, probably, you should have gotten a bigger pan than I did, but it's what I had immediately available. So, like I said, this is all, you don't have to go out and buy, specific things. You can alter the recipe however you wish. It's just, family cooking. Whatever you want to do. Of course, you probably don't want your young and helping out too heavily with cooking the meat, flame and hot and all of that. But one thing that I definitely helped out with when I was little was putting the pizza sauce on the buns. It was probably a big part of what got me to want to cook in the first place. Want to crank up the heat just a little bit. Not quite on high, but getting there. That way everything... You want to do it on low before you add the spices, just so that you can get everything broken up. You can get all the spices well mixed in. And then high is so that you can just kind of finish it off and get it all into submission a little bit faster. Now this is, of course, like I said, the cheaper of the meats. The more fat that the meat has in it, the more it's going to grease up. So you definitely want, some kind... Never put grease down the drain. That's one big thing. You've probably heard stories in the past... I'm just going to put that back in the pan. You've probably heard stories in the past where, if you leave your hot water running over it while the whole thing was hot, it won't... Yeah, there's a little flare up from the grease. Because this is a gas stove, which is, personally, I think, much better to cook with. And this pan is a little too small for the amount of grease that's in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get my can here so that I can dump some of this grease early. Because the less grease you have in the final product, the better the pizza is going to turn out. But, like I said, the more fat that's in the meat, the more it's going to want to grease up as the fat renders. So we're just going to do what we can to get as much of that out as possible early. That way, whenever we drain it, there's as little grease as possible. And then there's also been a video running around of, I don't know if they do it as a joke, it seems like it's a joke, but they do a bunch of culinary no-nos. Like, they drain the grease first off in a sink, which is a big no-no, but they put it in a colander and they rinse the meat with water. I'm really hoping it's a joke, but this world has all kinds of people, so I wouldn't put it past some. Don't do that. That's a real big don't do that. But anyway, we're just going to keep going until all of the meat is brown. We don't see any more pink, which I am coming upon that shortly. It's about there. And it's actually okay if there's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of pink left, because we're still going to have to cook the actual pizza with this. But get it as unpink as you can. So I've gotten to that point. I know it's just going to look like a big brown cluster there. But now that the meat is cooked, go ahead and throw that away. Since it's going to take a few more minutes, we're going to set our oven. And we don't want it to be too high because we don't want the burger bun to actually, start to burn. So we're going to set it to about 300. And we're going to, I have lined this with some paper towels. And we are going to get all this meat in there so that we can absorb some more of that grease. Paper towel is a very happy thing to have in pretty much any kitchen, just because, especially if you're cooking with meats, getting that grease out is such a great thing. Alright, put that in the sink. Put my spices up real quick. And then we will get on to assembling the burgers. So I have a large pan with some aluminum foil, and now we start. Twist ties, I hate them so much. But now we will start putting the pizzas together. So obviously a pizza is a one-sided item, so you don't have to split them apart or anything. Personally, I think it's a little bit easier if you don't split them, because then you have the ability to make sure that all of the cheese gets all over more of surface area, that way, since they're connected. Of course, this pan, in order to make this many pizzas, is going to have to be split slightly, because I don't have space for all of the buns without doing that. But the more space that's taken, the easier it's going to be to, yeah, see, I'm down an entire top worth of space. So I'll just leave that on top of there for later. I don't know, maybe we'll make one of these a burger. Pizza burger. Anyway, the meat, it's still just trying to get all of that grease out. So now for the part that if you have kids, they can help with, if you're trusting enough, which This part doesn't have to do with any kind of heat or anything. Just get a big old spoon, pop open your sauce, and always stir sauce like this because it's got oil in it. Whoops. And another reason why paper towels are so helpful. I decided to stir a little bit too vigorously and I got it on myself. Oh well. That's home cooking. So now we just gotta get a good old spoonful and layer it on. Spread it out a bit. I like to go a little heavy on the sauce. That way it absorbs into the bun more. And of course, since we lined it with aluminum foil, it doesn't really matter if it goes over the edge or anything. Honestly, I prefer it to go over the edge a bit, just because it means that you've sauced more area, so you won't get a single bite without sauce. And you just kind of get a big old spoon on going on each spot. And then, like I did with the first 4, you'll just spread it out. This is a rather sizable spoon and a rather sizable jar. Of course, you don't have to use as much sauce as I did. I recommend it. Some people don't like as much sauce. Some people don't like as much cheese. Everyone has their own taste. Everyone's got their own process. This is mine. And then, like I said, this is something that kids can help out with. It's not, I mean, of course it's messy. You know, a lot of cooking is art. Art is a lot of times a rather messy process. However, I'm sure if it's just another thing that you can expose your kids to, you know. So I didn't quite use the entire jar. I used most of it though. And then now we can get to our meat, which I will just spoon in just like we did with the sauce. You want to put the meat before the cheese. That way it gets trapped underneath the cheese and it's less likely to fall out while you're eating it, because the cheese will melt into the nooks and crannies of everything else. And of course, that was an 8-pack of hamburger buns as well. I don't know if I mentioned it or if you saw the package, but it was an 8-pack, which means that using the top and the bottom will create 16 little personal pizzas, which, you know, a family of 5 will still get 3 each. Even if you don't use, you know, one of them. Basic math. But, so, like I also said, that was about 2 pounds of meat. So, I'm going to just kind of use as much of this meat as can fit. I haven't quite gotten all of the meat out, but I'm close. 2 pounds of meat may have been slightly more than we'll want to fit properly. But, oh well. You can always just, you know, have more. So I used basically all of the meat right there. And that meat is piled real high. And then comes the cheese. The triple cheddar and the mozzarella. And like I said, I just like to have as much cheese as possible. So I'm literally just going to pour it on there as much as I can. You can use whatever cheeses you wanted, of course. You don't even really have to do anything special. I'm just making as much of this cheese over here as possible. And it's another thing that your kids can help with. Of course, as you can see, things get messy, especially if you're trying to be kind of fast, as I am. Just because I'm emulating how a little kid's going to do it. So they're just going to, they may not even try to, get it out evenly. They're just going to throw it on there. But, I mean, that's part of the fun of it. You just kind of get it going. And then your kid gets to say that they helped with dinner. Your kid gets to say, I'm cooking. There's just so many positives, especially whenever you've got kids, having them feel the joy of being able to say, I did that. So, like I said, gets a bit messy sometimes. And we are going to make sure that nothing is like super over the side. So, big old pan. And we're just going to pop her in the oven. I'm going to put her in there for, we'll see how it turns out at about 10 minutes. And then we will see how they turn out. Alright, so as you can see, while everything was cooking, I cleaned up the area quite a bit. That's another thing that's nice about this specific recipe. I only used a few dishes, so its cleanup is relatively easy as well. So, now I'm going to get the pizzas out of the oven. It's been roughly 8 minutes-ish. So, there we go. There's our little individual pizzas all wrapped up in their one spot. So now, in order to show you guys an individual, just kind of slide it across there, peel it apart. Look at that. You now have, in my specific case, because of size constraints, 15 individual little pizzas. So, we will be back at another time to make more of these Eatin Cheaps. And if you like what you're looking at, make sure to subscribe so that you get notifications on when I'm doing stuff at another time. I'm going to attempt to do this every Wednesday at some point, at least, just so that, everyone can have as much of this idea as they want. And that will be all for today. Hope you like the meal.